The morning sun was shining bright over the busy streets of downtown. People were walking to work, cars were moving slowly through traffic, and the city was coming to life like it did every Tuesday morning. But this wasn't going to be just another ordinary day. Maya Rodriguez had just finished her volunteer work at the Happy Paws Animal Shelter. She was 16 years old and had been blind since birth, but that never stopped her from living her life to the fullest. Every Tuesday and Thursday, she would take the bus downtown to help feed the animals and clean their cages. The shelter workers loved having her around because she had such a positive attitude and always made everyone smile. Maya was walking down 5th Street, using her white cane to feel her way along the sidewalk. She knew this route by heart. Left, turn at the corner where the coffee shop was, straight for 2 blocks past the bank, then right toward the bus stop. She had walked this same path hundreds of times before. The familiar sounds of the city guided her. The honking of car horns, people talking on their phones, the rumbling of buses stopping and starting. She was thinking about the new puppy that had arrived at the shelter that morning. It was a small golden retriever mix that had been scared and shaking when it first came in. Maya had spent extra time sitting with the puppy, gently petting it and talking softly until it calmed down. Moments like these reminded her why she loved volunteering so much. As Maya continued walking, she was listening to music through her earbuds. It was her favorite playlist, a mix of pop songs and upbeat music that always made her feel happy. She was humming along to one of the songs when she noticed something different. There was construction work happening on the sidewalk ahead. She could hear the sounds of machinery and workers talking. Usually, when there was construction, the city would put up special barriers and warning signs for people who couldn't see. But today something was wrong. The barriers were set up in a confusing way, and there were no audio warnings or tactile guides that would help someone with a visual impairment navigate safely around the work area. Maya slowed down and tried to feel her way around the construction zone with her cane. She was being very careful, tapping the ground in front of her to make sure she didn't step into any holes or bump into equipment. The workers were busy with their job and didn't notice her trying to get through. Just a few blocks away, something interesting was happening. 2 very famous people were walking down the same street, but hardly anyone recognized them. Dwayne Johnson, who everyone knew as The Rock from his wrestling days and movies, was talking quietly with his friend John Cena, another famous wrestler and actor. They weren't dressed in fancy clothes or surrounded by bodyguards like you might expect. Instead, they were wearing simple jeans and t-shirts, baseball caps pulled down low, just trying to blend in with everyone else. They had come to town for a special charity event at the Children's Hospital later that day, but they had arrived early because they wanted to walk around the city and meet regular people. The Rock always said that the best part of being famous wasn't the money or the movie roles, it was being able to help people and make a difference in their communities. John Cena felt the same way. They both believed that with great fame came great responsibility to use their influence for good. As they walked, they were talking about the charity event and how excited they were to meet the kids at the hospital. They had brought special gifts and were planning to spend the whole afternoon there, taking pictures, signing autographs, and just making the children smile. "I love doing these hospital visits," The Rock was saying to John. "Those kids are so brave, much braver than any character I've ever played in a movie." John nodded in agreement. "It puts everything in perspective, doesn't it? We complain about long days on movie sets, but these kids are fighting battles we can't even imagine." They continued walking, enjoying the simple pleasure of being able to move around without being mobbed by fans. Every now and then, someone would look at them twice, wondering if they were really seeing the famous wrestlers, but most people were too busy with their own lives to notice. Meanwhile, Officer Derek Thompson was having a bad morning. He had been a police officer for 15 years, and lately he had been getting more and more complaints about his behavior. His supervisors had talked to him several times about his attitude, but Thompson always found excuses for his actions. Thompson had grown up in a different time, he told himself. He had old-fashioned ideas about how things should be, and he didn't like how much the world was changing around him. He often felt angry and frustrated, and unfortunately, he took those feelings out on the people he was supposed to protect and serve. That morning, Thompson had already had 2 arguments. one with his sergeant about his paperwork, and another with a store owner who had called to complain about teenagers hanging around outside his shop. Thompson was driving his patrol car slowly through downtown, looking for any excuse to assert his authority. He spotted the construction zone on 5th Street and decided to park his car nearby. Construction sites sometimes attracted troublemakers, he reasoned, and it was his job to keep an eye on things. In reality, Thompson was just looking for someone to bother, someone he could push around to make himself feel better about his frustrating morning. As Thompson got out of his patrol car, he noticed Maya trying to navigate around the construction barriers. She was moving slowly and carefully, using her cane to feel her way along. Any decent person would have immediately offered to help her, but Thompson's mind worked differently. Instead of seeing a young person who needed assistance, Thompson saw someone he could hassle. He didn't like that Maya was taking her time, and he didn't like that she was moving so slowly. In his twisted thinking, he convinced himself that she was somehow causing problems. The Rock and John Cena were now only about a block away still, talking about their plans for the hospital visit. They had no idea that they were about to witness something that would change their entire day, and possibly change the life of a young woman who was just trying to get home safely. Maya finally thought she had found a clear path around the construction. She was moving step by step, being extra careful not to trip or walk into anything. The workers were making a lot of noise, and it was hard for her to hear the usual sounds that helped her navigate. She was doing her best to stay out of everyone's way and get through the area as quickly as possible. The morning sun was getting warmer, and more people were starting to fill the streets as the business day began. None of them knew that in just a few minutes an ordinary Tuesday morning was about to become something that would be talked about for years to come. Maya was almost through the construction zone when she realized she had made a small mistake in her navigation. She had moved slightly off course and was now heading toward what she thought was clear sidewalk, but was actually closer to where Officer Thompson was standing beside his patrol car. The stage was set for an encounter that would test the character of everyone involved and show the world what happens when ordinary people find the courage to stand up for what's right. Maya was carefully making her way around the last construction barrier when it happened. Her white cane caught on a loose piece of plastic sheeting that was flapping in the wind. As she tried to untangle it, she took a small step to the side, not realizing that Officer Thompson was standing right there next to his patrol car. She bumped into him very lightly, barely touching his arm. It was the kind of small accident that happens in busy cities every day. Most people would just say, "Excuse me," and move on with their day. But Thompson wasn't most people. "Hey, watch where you're going," Thompson shouted much louder than necessary. His voice was harsh and angry, causing several people walking nearby to stop and look. Maya was startled by the sudden yelling. She had been listening to her music and focusing on navigating the construction area, so she hadn't heard him approaching. "Oh, I'm so sorry, officer," she said politely, taking a step back. "I didn't see you there. I was trying to get around the construction." But Thompson was already working himself up into a rage. He looked at Maya with disgust, taking in her appearance. Her long dark hair, her brown skin, and the white cane in her hand. In his narrow mind, he started making assumptions about who she was and where she came from. "Don't give me that attitude," Thompson snapped, even though Maya had been nothing but polite. "Let me see some ID. Now." Maya was confused but tried to stay calm. She had done nothing wrong, but she knew it was better not to argue with police officers. She carefully reached into her small backpack and pulled out her wallet, feeling around for her identification card. "Here you go, sir," she said, holding out her ID card. Her hands were shaking slightly because she could tell the officer was very angry, and she didn't understand why. Thompson grabbed the card roughly from her hand and looked at it. When he saw her last name, Rodriguez, his face twisted with even more dislike. "Rodriguez," he said, pronouncing it with obvious disgust. "Of course it is. What are you doing in this part of town?" "I was volunteering at the animal shelter," Maya explained, her voice getting smaller. "I do it every Tuesday and Thursday. I'm just trying to get to the bus stop to go home." "Volunteering?" Thompson laughed, but it wasn't a nice laugh. "Right. I'm sure that's what you call it. You kids today think you can just wander around anywhere you want, causing problems." Maya was getting more confused and scared by the minute. She hadn't caused any problems. She had accidentally bumped into him, apologized immediately, and shown him her ID when he asked. She couldn't understand why he was being so mean to her. Meanwhile, The Rock and John Cena were walking down the same street, getting closer to the scene. They could hear someone yelling, but at first, they thought it might just be construction workers calling out instructions to each other. "Sounds like they're having a busy day over there," John said, nodding toward the construction area. But as they got closer, they realized the yelling wasn't coming from the workers. It was coming from somewhere else, and it sounded angry and threatening. Back at the patrol car, Thompson was getting more aggressive by the minute. "I don't like your attitude," he told Maya, even though she hadn't shown any attitude at all. "You think you can just bump into police officers and walk away like nothing happened?" "Sir, I really am sorry," Maya said, her voice shaking now. "It was an accident. I couldn't see you because I'm blind. That's why I have this cane." She held up her white cane, hoping he would understand. But Thompson didn't care about her explanation. In fact, her disability seemed to make him even angrier. "Don't use that as an excuse," he snarled. "I'm tired of people like you thinking you can get away with anything just because you have some sob story." The construction workers had noticed what was happening and were starting to watch. A few people walking by had also stopped to see what all the yelling was about. Everyone could tell that something was very wrong with this situation. Maya was trying hard not to cry. She had never been treated like this before. Most people in her community knew her and were kind to her. She had never encountered such meanness and hostility, especially from someone who was supposed to help people. "Please, officer," she said quietly. "I just want to go home. I haven't done anything wrong." "That's not for you to decide," Thompson shot back. "I decide whether you've done something wrong or not. And right now, I think you're being disrespectful and trying to cause trouble." Thompson was now standing very close to Maya, using his size and position to intimidate her. She could feel his anger radiating toward her, and she instinctively took a step back. But Thompson saw this as defiance. "Don't you walk away from me when I'm talking to you," he yelled, grabbing her arm roughly. Maya gasped in pain and fear. "Please don't hurt me," she whispered. "I'm not trying to walk away, I'm just scared." The Rock and John Cena were now close enough to see what was happening. They could see a police officer yelling at a young woman with a white cane, and it was clear that something was very wrong with this picture. "John," The Rock said quietly, slowing down. "Look at this. That doesn't look right." John Cena's expression became serious as he watched the scene unfold. "No, it doesn't. That girl looks terrified and she's just standing there holding a white cane. Why is he yelling at her like that?" They moved closer, trying to get a better view of what was happening. Other people were starting to gather around too, but most of them seemed afraid to get too close to the angry police officer. Thompson was now completely out of control. Maya's politeness and fear seemed to make him even more aggressive, as if he enjoyed having power over someone who couldn't fight back. "You people think you can just do whatever you want," he continued his rant. "Well, not on my watch. I'm going to teach you some respect." Maya was trembling now, holding her white cane close to her body like it might protect her somehow. "Please, sir," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just want to go home to my family." But Thompson had moved beyond reason. In his twisted mind, Maya represented everything he didn't like about the changing world around him. She was young, she was different from him, and she was vulnerable, which made her the perfect target for his anger and prejudice. The construction workers had stopped their work completely now. They were watching in disbelief as the situation continued to escalate. Some of them were pulling out their phones, sensing that they might need to record what was happening. "Sir," one of the construction workers called out, "is everything okay over there? The girl doesn't look like she's causing any trouble." Thompson spun around and glared at the worker. "Mind your own business," he shouted. "This is police business." The worker stepped back, intimidated by Thompson's aggression, but he kept his phone ready. He had a daughter about Maya's age, and watching this scene made him sick to his stomach. The Rock and John Cena were now close enough to hear everything that was being said. They could see Maya's white cane clearly, and they could hear the fear in her voice. They could also hear the hatred and unreasonable anger in Thompson's voice. "This is not right," The Rock said firmly. "We need to do something." John nodded. "That's just a kid with a white cane. She's blind and he's terrorizing her for no reason." They started walking faster toward the scene, but they were still about half a block away. They hoped they could get there before things got any worse. Unfortunately, Thompson was about to cross a line that would change everything. Maya, overwhelmed by fear and confusion, had started to cry quietly. The tears running down her face seemed to enrage Thompson even more. "Stop crying," he yelled at her. "I haven't given you anything to cry about yet." And then, in a moment that would be burned into the memory of everyone who witnessed it, Thompson did something unthinkable. He raised his foot and kicked Maya, causing her to stumble backward and fall to the ground. The sound of her body hitting the concrete sidewalk seemed to echo through the air. Her white cane flew out of her hand and skittered across the pavement, coming to rest several feet away from her. Maya lay on the ground, stunned and hurt, not understanding what had just happened to her. The construction workers gasped in shock. The few pedestrians who had been watching couldn't believe what they had just seen. And The Rock and John Cena, still running toward the scene, had witnessed the entire terrible moment. Their faces were filled with anger and determination as they prepared to intervene in a situation that had gone far beyond what any decent person could tolerate. The moment Maya hit the ground, everything seemed to freeze for just a second. The construction workers stopped what they were doing completely. People walking by stopped in their tracks. Even the traffic seemed to slow down as drivers tried to see what was happening on the sidewalk. Maya was lying on the concrete, her white cane broken in two pieces beside her. She was conscious but dazed, trying to understand what had just happened to her. Her knee was scraped and bleeding from where she had hit the ground, and her hands were shaking as she tried to push herself up. Officer Thompson stood over her, breathing heavily, his face red with anger. For a moment he seemed shocked by what he had done, but then his arrogance took over again. He looked around at the people watching and raised his voice. "That's what happens when you don't show respect to law enforcement," he announced loudly, as if he was proud of what he had just done. "Maybe next time she'll think twice before causing problems." The construction workers were looking at each other in disbelief. The oldest worker, a man named Pete who had been doing construction for 30 years, shook his head sadly. He had seen a lot of things in his time, but he had never seen a police officer attack a blind teenager for no reason. "This ain't right," Pete whispered to his co-worker. "That poor girl didn't do nothing wrong." Meanwhile, The Rock and John Cena had broken into a run when they saw Maya fall. They were still about 50 yards away, but they could see everything clearly now. The Rock's face was a mask of controlled anger, while John Cena looked like he wanted to charge ahead even faster. "Did that officer just kick a blind girl?" John asked as they ran, hardly believing what he had seen. "Yes, he did," The Rock replied grimly. "And we're going to make sure everyone knows about it." As they got closer, they could see that Maya was trying to sit up, but she was having trouble because she couldn't see where her cane had gone. She was feeling around on the ground with her hands trying to find it, but it had landed too far away for her to reach. Thompson was now standing with his hands on his hips, looking down at Maya like she was bothering him by being hurt. "Get up," he ordered. "Stop making a scene." "I can't find my cane," Maya said quietly, her voice shaking. "Could you please help me find it?" "Find it yourself," Thompson replied coldly. "I'm not your personal assistant." That was the moment when The Rock and John Cena arrived at the scene. They approached quickly but calmly, knowing that they needed to be smart about how they handled the situation. "Excuse me, officer," The Rock said in his deep, commanding voice. "Is there a problem here?" Thompson turned around, ready to tell these interfering strangers to mind their own business, but his jaw dropped when he saw who was talking to him. Even with their baseball caps pulled low, there was no mistaking The Rock's massive frame and distinctive features. Are you Dwayne Johnson?" Thompson stuttered, suddenly forgetting all about Maya lying on the ground behind him. "Yes, I am," The Rock replied calmly. "And this is my friend John Cena. We saw what just happened here, and we're very concerned." While The Rock was talking to Thompson, John Cena had moved over to Maya. He knelt down beside her, his voice gentle and reassuring. "Hey there," he said softly. "My name is John. Are you hurt? Do you need help getting up? Maya looked confused and scared. She had heard The Rock's voice in John's introduction, but she couldn't quite believe that two famous wrestlers were suddenly there helping her. Are you really John Cena? She asked quietly. Yes, I am, John replied with a small smile. And, right now the most important thing is making sure you're okay. Are you injured? My knee hurts, Maya admitted, and I can't find my cane. It broke when I fell. John looked around and spotted the two pieces of her white cane lying several feet away. I see it, he said. Let me get it for you. He carefully picked up both pieces and brought them back to her. I'm sorry, he said gently. It looks like it broke in half. But don't worry, we're going to take care of this. Meanwhile, The Rock was having a very different conversation with Officer Thompson. Thompson was trying to act like nothing unusual had happened, but The Rock's intense stare was making him nervous. Officer, The Rock said, his voice still calm but with an edge of steel in it. We witnessed you kick this young woman. She's clearly visually impaired and she wasn't causing any trouble. Can you explain to us why you felt it was necessary to use force against her? Thompson's face was getting red again, but now it was from embarrassment rather than anger. Having two of the most famous people in the world questioning his actions wasn't something he had prepared for. She was being disrespectful, Thompson said, but his voice lacked the confidence it had before. She bumped into me and then gave me attitude when I asked for her ID. We watched the whole thing, The Rock replied firmly. We saw her apologize to you. We heard her being polite and respectful. What we saw was you yelling at a blind teenager who was trying to navigate around a construction zone. By now, more people had gathered around the scene. Some of them had recognized The Rock and John Cena, and phones were starting to come out. People were taking pictures and recording videos, realizing they were witnessing something important. John had helped Maya get back on her feet, supporting her arm while she found her balance. Are you able to stand okay? He asked. I think so, Maya replied, though she was still shaking. Thank you for helping me. I don't understand why that officer was so angry with me. You didn't do anything wrong, John assured her. Not one single thing. What happened to you was completely unfair, and we're going to make sure it gets sorted out. The Rock had pulled out his own phone and was making a call. I'm calling 911, he announced loudly enough for everyone to hear, including Thompson. This young woman needs medical attention and we need to report what just happened here. Thompson's eyes went wide. Wait, you don't need to call anyone, he said quickly. This is just a misunderstanding. I can handle this situation. No, The Rock said firmly, holding up his hand. You had your chance to handle this situation properly, and instead, you chose to attack an innocent person. Now, other people are going to handle it. John Cena had his phone out too, but he was using it to take pictures of Maya's scraped knee and the broken pieces of her cane. We need to document this, he explained to her quietly. These pictures will help show what really happened here. The construction workers were talking among themselves and Pete stepped forward. Excuse me, Mr. Johnson, he said respectfully. We saw the whole thing too. That officer was way out of line. We got it all on video if you need witnesses. Thank you, The Rock replied. That's very helpful. Can you make sure to save that video? It's going to be important. Thompson was looking around frantically now, realizing that his actions had been witnessed and recorded by multiple people, including two celebrities who had millions of followers on social media. This was turning into his worst nightmare. Look, Thompson said, trying to sound reasonable. Maybe I was a little harsh, but she was jaywalking and causing problems with the construction work. She wasn't jaywalking, John Cena said, standing up from where he had been helping Maya. She was walking on the sidewalk, trying to get around construction barriers that weren't properly marked for people with visual impairments. And the only problem we saw was you yelling at her for no reason. Maya was listening to all of this with amazement. She had never had anyone stand up for her like this before, especially not famous people who didn't even know her name. It was overwhelming, but in a good way. An ambulance arrived first, followed quickly by 2 more police cars. The paramedics immediately went to check on Maya, while the other officers approached the scene to find out what had happened. The Rock stepped forward to meet the supervising officer. "I'm Dwayne Johnson," he said, "and this is John Cena. We witnessed an incident of police brutality against this young woman, and we want to make sure it's properly investigated." The supervising officer, Sergeant Williams, looked shocked to see two celebrities at what he had expected to be a routine call. "Can you tell me what happened?" he asked. "We saw Officer Thompson kick this young woman, causing her to fall and injure herself," The Rock explained clearly. "She's visually impaired, she was being polite and cooperative, and there was absolutely no justification for what he did." Sergeant Williams looked over at Thompson, who was now standing by himself, looking very uncomfortable. "Is this true, Thompson?" Thompson opened his mouth to deny it, but then he saw all the phones pointing at him and realized there was no point in lying. It was an accident," he mumbled. "An accident?" John Cena stepped forward, his voice filled with disbelief. "You accidentally lifted your foot and kicked a blind teenager hard enough to knock her down?" The crowd that had gathered was getting larger, and people were starting to recognize what was happening. Someone shouted, "We got it all on video," and others began chiming in with their support for Maya. As the paramedics finished checking Maya's injuries, The Rock approached her. "How are you feeling?" he asked kindly. "Better," Maya replied, though she still seemed overwhelmed by everything that had happened. "Thank you so much for helping me. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been here." "Don't thank us," The Rock said. "You shouldn't have needed anyone to help you. What happened to you should never happen to anyone, ever." 3 hours later, the scene on 5th Street had completely transformed. What started as a quiet Tuesday morning had become the center of a media storm that was spreading across the internet faster than anyone could have imagined. Maya was sitting in the back of an ambulance, her knee properly bandaged by the paramedics. She was no longer shaking with fear. Instead, she felt surrounded by kindness and support from people she had never met before. The Rock was sitting beside her, making sure she felt safe, while John Cena was on his phone coordinating with their management team. "Maya," The Rock said, gently, "I know this has been a scary day for you, but I want you to know that what happened here is going to make a difference. Not just for you, but for other people who might face similar situations." Maya nodded, still trying to process everything that had happened. "I never thought anyone would believe me if I told them what that officer did," she said quietly. "People always believe police officers over regular people like me." "Well, today you have witnesses," John Cena said, closing his phone and joining the conversation. "And not just us. All those construction workers saw what happened. People recorded it on their phones. The truth is going to come out. Officer Thompson was no longer on the scene. Sergeant Williams had immediately suspended him and sent him home while the investigation began. The other officers who had arrived were taking statements from all the witnesses, and the evidence was overwhelming. Pete, the construction worker, had given his video to the police and also uploaded it to social media. Within an hour, it had been shared thousands of times. People were outraged by what they saw, and the video was being picked up by news stations across the country. "I've been doing construction for 30 years, Pete told a reporter who had arrived on the scene. "I've never seen anything like what that officer did to that poor girl. She was just trying to get home, and he attacked her for no reason. Thank God The Rock and John Cena were here to help her." The Rock's phone had been ringing non-stop. His publicist, his manager, and reporters from major news networks were all trying to reach him. But he wasn't interested in talking to the media right now. His focus was entirely on making sure Maya was okay and that justice would be served. "Maya," he said, "my team wants to make sure you and your family have everything you need. We're going to help you get a new cane, and we want to make sure you get proper medical care for your injuries." "You don't have to do that," Maya replied, though she was touched by the offer. "You've already done so much just by helping me today." "This isn't about what we have to do," John Cena explained. "This is about what's right. What happened to you was wrong, and we want to help make it right." Maya's mother, Carmen Rodriguez, had rushed to the scene as soon as she heard what happened. She was a single mother who worked 2 jobs to support Maya and her younger brother. and she was both furious and heartbroken about what her daughter had gone through. "I can't believe someone would hurt my baby like this," Carmen said, tears in her eyes as she hugged Maya. She's never hurt anyone in her life. All she does is volunteer and try to help others. The Rock stood up to shake Carmen's hand. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I'm Dwayne Johnson. I want you to know that your daughter showed incredible strength and grace today, even when she was being treated terribly. You should be proud of her." Carmen looked up at the massive wrestler, still hardly believing that her daughter's story had brought such famous people into their lives. "Thank you for protecting her," she said simply. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been there." By evening, the story had exploded across social media. The Rock and John Cena both posted about the incident on their accounts, which had millions of followers combined. The hashtag Maya Deserves Justice was trending on Twitter, and people from around the world were sharing their own stories of discrimination and police misconduct. The Rock's post was simple but powerful. "Today we witnessed an act of cruelty against a young woman who was guilty of nothing more than being different. Maya Rodriguez is blind, but she sees the world more clearly than the officer who attacked her. This cannot be tolerated in our society." John Cena's post focused on action. "Witnessing injustice and staying silent makes you part of the problem. Today we saw courage from bystanders who spoke up, and we saw cowardice from someone who abused his power. Change starts when good people refuse to look the other way." The posts were shared hundreds of thousands of times within hours. Celebrities, politicians, and ordinary people were all commenting and sharing their support for Maya. But more importantly, they were demanding accountability and change. The police department was overwhelmed with calls and emails demanding that Officer Thompson be fired and charged with assault. The mayor's office was getting similar pressure. Local news stations were running the story as their lead item, and national news networks were picking it up as well. Chief of Police Patricia Morgan called an emergency press conference that evening. She stood behind a podium filled with microphones and cameras, looking serious and determined. "Today, an officer under my command committed an act that goes against everything we stand for as law enforcement professionals," Chief Morgan announced. "Officer Derek Thompson has been suspended without pay pending a full investigation. Based on the evidence we've seen so far, I expect that he will face both criminal charges and termination from the force." She continued, "I want to personally apologize to Maya Rodriguez and her family. What happened to her was inexcusable, and it does not represent the values of our police department or our community." The crowd of reporters erupted with questions, but Chief Morgan held up her hand. "I also want to thank the witnesses who came forward, including Mr. Johnson and Mr. Cena, whose intervention prevented this situation from becoming even worse. Their actions today showed what it means to be good citizens and good human beings." Back at the hospital, where Maya was getting her knee properly treated, The Rock and John Cena were making plans that would extend far beyond this single incident. "Can't just help Maya and walk away," The Rock said to John as they sat in the waiting room. "This happens to people every day who don't have celebrities around to help them. We need to do something bigger." John nodded in agreement. "I've been thinking the same thing. What if we started a foundation? Something that helps people who face discrimination and provides legal support when they need it." "That's exactly what I was thinking," The Rock replied. "And we should partner with organizations that train police officers on how to interact with people with disabilities. This whole thing could have been avoided if that officer had any proper training." Maya's story was inspiring action in other ways too. The construction company that had been working on 5th Street announced that they would implement new safety protocols to make their work sites more accessible for people with visual impairments. They also donated money to the local organization that provided services for people with disabilities. The animal shelter where Maya volunteered received hundreds of donations from people who had heard her story. The shelter director was amazed by the outpouring of support. "Maya is one of our most dedicated volunteers," the director told reporters. "She has such a positive attitude and genuine love for the animals. The fact that someone would treat her cruelly just shows how much work we still have to do to build a more inclusive society." 3 weeks later, Officer Thompson was officially fired from the police force and charged with assault and civil rights violations. The video evidence and witness testimony made the case straightforward, and his lawyer advised him to accept a plea deal rather than go to trial. But the real changes were happening in ways that were harder to measure but more important in the long run. The police department implemented new training programs on interacting with people with disabilities. The city improved accessibility features throughout downtown, adding audio signals at crosswalks and better tactile guidance around construction zones. Maya returned to her volunteer work at the animal shelter, but now she was also speaking at schools and community events about disability awareness and the importance of treating everyone with respect and dignity. "What happened to me was terrible," she would tell audiences, "but the response from people in our community and around the world showed me that there are far more good people than bad people in the world. When we stand together and speak up for what's right, we can make real change happen." The Rock and John Cena kept their promise to start a foundation. The Maya Rodriguez Foundation for Justice and Equality provided legal support, advocacy, and education to help prevent discrimination and support victims when it occurred. 6 months after the incident, Maya was invited to appear on a national talk show alongside The Rock and John Cena. She sat confidently in her chair, her new high-tech white cane beside her, talking about how the experience had changed her life. "I learned that even when terrible things happen, they can lead to positive changes if we don't give up," she said to the host. "I also learned that there are people in the world who will stand up for strangers just because it's the right thing to do." The Rock smiled as he listened to her speak. "Maya taught us something too," he said. "She showed us that real strength isn't about how much you can lift or how famous you are. Real strength is how you respond when life knocks you down." Maya got knocked down that day, but she got back up and turned her pain into purpose. John Cena nodded in agreement. "And the most important lesson is that we all have the power to make a difference. You don't have to be famous or rich or powerful. You just have to care enough to act when you see something wrong happening." The story of what happened on 5th Street that Tuesday morning continued to inspire people years later. It became a case study in police training programs, a lesson in school curricula about standing up to bullying and discrimination, and a reminder that ordinary moments can become extraordinary when people choose to do the right thing. Maya graduated high school with honors and received a full scholarship to college. Funded partly by donations from people who had heard her story, she planned to study law so she could help other people who face discrimination and injustice. "That officer thought he could hurt me and get away with it because I was different and vulnerable," Maya said in her graduation speech. "But he was wrong. He didn't just attack me that day. He attacked the values that make our community strong, and our community fought back, not with violence or hatred, but with love, support, and a commitment to justice. That's how real change happens."